Thank you so much for that kind introduction. Hey, everyone. How y'all doing today? Make some noise. Yeah, give it up. Oh, y'all didn't really respond very well to that. It's kind of awkward. Good. That's exactly what I wanted. Because my talk today is all about mistakes and discomfort. Raise your hand if you've ever made a mistake and then felt really bad about it for a long time afterwards. Maybe the next couple of days you spent judging yourself for it or worrying about what other people think about you. I've been there a lot of times. And mistakes can sometimes feel like a backpack full of rocks weighing you down, especially when they involve other people's perception of you. But here's the thing. Mistakes aren't always something to be ashamed of. Sometimes they're something to embrace and celebrate even. They're like those awkward moments in a video game, when you're like playing along and then you accidentally fall off a cliff or hit the wrong button and make your character randomly jump when he shouldn't be doing that, or just do something ridiculous in the game. It's frustrating in the moment, but what do? You turn off the console, you hit restart, and you keep on playing. So mistakes are these learning moments in disguise. And I'll give you some examples today from my own personal life and some from not my personal life that talk about why messing up isn't just okay, it's necessary. And I know that sounds weird, but hear me out. Mistakes are like nature's way of teaching us the hard stuff, and it's how we grow and learn. And if we change how we think about them, that might make mistakes suck a little bit less and make life a little bit easier. So what if instead of beating ourselves up for every little thing that goes wrong, we changed our perspective? Instead of thinking, oh, I failed, think, nice, I'm getting better. If this idea makes you uncomfortable, if you're feeling kind of weird right now, good. Discomfort is a sign that we're stepping outside of what's easy and familiar. And this is the space where growth happens. So I'm going to tell you how I turned some of my own embarrassing and awkward moments and mistakes into lessons and now strengths. So the first story I have for you is about how my parents used to force me to go on these camping retreats with other kids and parents from my church. One of these retreats was scheduled on a weekend when one of my friends' parents were out of town and he was throwing a massive party. Absolutely massive. Church camping retreat, massive party. Church camping retreat, massive party. Church camping retreat, massive party. You can see which one I preferred to go to more. So I came up with an idea to get out of going to the church retreat. I knew that my parents would keep me home if I was sick, but how could I convince them? They know if I was faking, right? Maybe I could find like a sick person and just kind of follow them around real close. And like anytime they just go up in there and like inhale some coughs. It's gross. I decided not to do that, but that's where my mind went first. Second place it went was to a little drink known as Ipecac. It is a pharmaceutical substance that is, they give it to you in the hospital when you accidentally drink bleach or eat rat poison, which, disclaimer, don't do that, by the way. Don't drink bleach or eat rat poison. Just quick disclaimer. But this liquid forces you to empty all of the contents of your stomach and a small portion of your soul. My plan was to drink this a few hours before I was supposed to leave for the retreat, throw up a little bit, do the whole song and dance in front of my parents, get pulled out of the retreat, then be back to normal in time to sneak out and go to the party. And so I wanted to time it perfectly so that I was sick at the time when I needed to go to the retreat, but well enough that I could still go to the party. So I decided to test it out the weekend before the party and the retreat at my buddy's house. And so I checked my watch, took a drink, and waited. And about 5 minutes after I had the drink, I started feeling really sick to my stomach. And throwing up is never cute, but believe me when I tell you this experience was hideous, like horrendous, horrifying, all those other H words. It was, It wasn't like your normal kind of like, like, blah, blah. It was more It's more of that. I went into a fit of uncontrollable, messy, and very intense retching. And this lasted for over half an hour. Even after my stomach was totally empty, I was still having these. It got every single particle that was behind my lips out. And then it kept going. I strained so hard, actually, that I pulled a muscle in my abs from the intensity. And it hurt really bad. I could barely gasp out desperate breaths of air between heaves. I didn't even have enough time to pull my head out of the toilet. So here I was, neck deep in the toilet bowl, just gasping for air, couldn't speak. It was a miserable experience. When the feeling finally subsided, my abs and my throat and even my jaw hurt. My voice was gone, and I felt super weak, like a newborn baby deer that could barely stand or walk. And the experience was so horrible that I decided I would rather go to the church camp and miss the party than ever feel that way again. In case anyone's thinking about doing this, learn from my mistake. I went to the retreat and actually had a really spiritually connected and relaxing time. I had some fun playing games, making jokes, won at tetherball a couple times. And when I came back to school after the weekend, I learned that within an hour of the party starting, the police showed up, busted the party, lined everyone up in the front yard, went down the line with each individual person, and wrote them all tickets for minor in possession of alcohol. So you can add getting a misdemeanor and having to do 200 hours of community service to the long list of reasons not to drink underage. My mistake of drinking the Ipecac ended up keeping me out of trouble. It led me to making not just a healthier choice for my body, but a smarter choice to avoid very real legal consequences. I listen to my gut, literally, especially when it tells me that something doesn't feel right or never to drink a certain liquid again. Has there ever been a time when you should have listened to your gut? Take a minute, turn to your neighbor, and talk about that time. Share what you learned, what you would have done differently, and what you got out of it. I'll give you all a minute while I hydrate myself. Okay, bring it on back. I've got more to share with you today. Some mistakes end up actually making the world a better place. Who here has had these babies? Cheetos, America's favorite cheese puff snack. You might think there was some food scientist who worked long and hard to create the perfect snack. But here's the thing, Cheetos were actually made by mistake. Back in the 1940s, during World War II, a small company called Frito had just started making cornmeal products. They had these machines that puffed up the corn into different shapes, like tubes, to create snacks. One day, one of their workers, Charles Elmer Doolin, was experimenting with the machines and things went a little sideways. The machine was supposed to puff up the cornmeal and make it look smooth and uniform. But something went wrong with the recipe. The cornmeal started coming out all gnarled and knobby like a witch's finger. And normally they'd throw that out and start over, or recalibrate the machine, or just use a different machine. But Doolin, being curious, decided to keep it and see what he could do with these misshapen clumps. He tasted it, and there was a good crunch. It didn't have much flavor, but there was potential in that crunch. So most people would have stopped where he continued going, and they would have said to themselves, oh, this is not right. I'm just going to move on. But Doolin saw opportunity where others saw failure. He thought, what if I try adding some seasoning to this? He added some salt, but that wasn't quite enough. Tried a bunch of different flavors, and then he hit on something that would change the snack industry forever. Cheese powder. It wasn't any ordinary cheese powder. If you've ever eaten these, you know. It's like a sticky kind of glue-like substance, a rich cheesy blend that sticks to the Cheeto until it then transfers to your finger. When he tasted that, boom, something clicked. It wasn't just any snack, it was kind of addictive. Who here has ever eaten only one Cheeto, right? Once you have one, you want to have more. That's what Doolin created, and all by accident. I'm sure at first he wasn't sure how the public was going to react to his cheesy experiment, but once people got their hands on them, they couldn't stop eating, and it wasn't long before Cheetos became one of the best-selling snacks in America, all because of a machine malfunction, now $1 billion product. Later on, researchers tried to change the recipe to Cheetos to make that glue-like cheese powder less sticky so that people could keep their hands cleaner. But after doing a little bit of research, they learned that people actually liked having those little cheesy pads on the end of their fingers that they could, kind of bite off and just get a very concentrated taste of that cheese powder. So something that they thought was wrong with the product actually ended up being part of people's favorite aspect of it. So that's why they still stick to your finger. Now think about stuff that's happened in your own life. What do you think is a failure that's happened to you that could actually lead to something incredible? Could be the next $1 billion snack. Back to me, though. This next story is really embarrassing, and you'll see why in a second. But when I was younger, bullying happened a lot growing up. I've had eggs thrown at my house. I've had flour poured in my car AC vents so that when I turn on the air conditioning, it got blasted. And I've had hundreds of forks and toothpicks stuck in my yard. I'm not going to give you any more examples because I don't want to give you all any ideas. But needless to say, there was a lot going on. The most embarrassing instance for me, though, was this time that my friends used a really embarrassing photo of me to create a date ad that they printed out and taped up all over the school. Here's what it looked like. My gosh, the shame. It says desperate for women. And it explained how I was so lonely and sad that women should go out with me out of pity. And it listed my home and cell phone numbers on it. Now, my high school self would hate me for putting this up on screen in front of all of you. I couldn't go down the school and go down the hallways and tear them down fast enough. I was humiliated because they were everywhere. And every time I tried to pull one down, I would come back the next period and it would be right back up. And I couldn't escape it. I really didn't want to come to school for several days while these things were hanging up and reappearing all over the classrooms and hallways. But then something weird happened. I actually got a phone call or two from some women. And popular kids who didn't even know me at all before started recognizing me. Granted, it was kind of an embarrassing way to recognize me, but they still knew me. And I started to see it as an opportunity for free publicity instead of something to be ashamed of. So I really leaned into the awkwardness, and suddenly it wasn't embarrassing. It became really funny. If I'd stayed ashamed about it, I would have felt so down on myself. But because I leaned into that awkwardness, I actually found it really hilarious and didn't mind that they were up. I would pose for photos next to the date ad. And now look, I'm going around the country purposely showing hundreds of people something that at the time was my most embarrassing moment. So I went from crying myself to sleep at night, trying not to think about it, to waking up and excited to show it to more people, and now doing it on purpose. So the next time something embarrassing happens to you, you can ask yourself, how can I use this? How can I turn this into something positive? The last story that I have for you is similar in that it deals with, pranking and bullying. But something else we did when I was in school was we snuck out at night, meet up together with my friends, and terrorize our neighborhood by pranking our neighbors. And one night we were out ding-dong ditching houses, just ringing the doorbell a bunch of times in the middle of the night, and then running away and hiding, doing that over and over again. And we were really picking on this one girl from our class's house because every time we did it, her dad would come out into the driveway and look around for us. It was kind of sadistically satisfying. And after maybe the fourth or fifth time we did it, we were hiding in the bushes across the street, And he came outside to the driveway again. But this time he spotted us and he goes, "Hey, I see you." And he started coming over. So we bolted out of there. And much to our surprise, he was not wearing house slippers anymore. He had put on running shoes and he was going after us at a full sprint. And we started running down this steep hill to get to a dark field at the end of our neighborhood to try and escape. I was at the back, so I could hear his footsteps getting closer and closer, almost close enough to like grab me by the shirt. And then all of a sudden I hear, "Ah!" Boom. I looked over my shoulder and I saw that he had tripped and fallen face first on the asphalt. And he was slow to get up and he was holding his head. My other friends saw it too, and they just kind of laughed and kept on running. But in that moment, I still remember it really clearly. It felt like time was moving in slow motion. I felt a lot of different thoughts all come to me at the same time. Like, I should run. I should help him. Is he okay? Am I going to be in trouble? What should I do? And something in my heart told me that making sure he was okay was more important than staying out of trouble. So I stopped, turned around, walked back to where he was, and I helped him up and, brushed him off and asked if he was okay. I got a chance to apologize to him for bothering him and his family. And I could see that on his face, he was annoyed. But what surprised me was that more than being annoyed, he was grateful and a little bit proud, because he didn't expect me to come back for him, especially because he knew my parents and he knew he could get me in trouble. But in that moment, making sure he was okay was more important than getting away. And the next day, he did call my parents. But instead of emphasizing the bad things I'd done by sneaking out and pranking his house in the middle of the night, he emphasized how in the moment when it mattered, I had done the right thing. The mistakes of breaking my parents' rules by sneaking out, and the rules of just common human decency by not ringing someone's doorbell over and over again at 2 a.m. Helped me learn more about myself and uncover my moral compass. Gave me a chance to practice doing the right thing, even though to get to that point, I had to make a lot of wrong turns and do a lot of wrong things. And the point of the story is that we all make mistakes, but sometimes it's how we handle them that really counts. It's never too late to say, "I'm sorry." Listen to your heart. It knows what's right even when others around you aren't doing it. So in closing, I'll say that sometimes I perform improv and stand-up comedy on stage, and there's a lot of pressure to say something clever or funny because there's an audience watching you. But sometimes the funniest part of a scene happens as a result of a mistake. I'm going to pull this down. This has been on screen for way too long. All right. Where was I? Performing improv. There's a lot of pressure to say something funny and to be super dialed in. But sometimes the funniest part of a scene happens as a result of a mistake. We were doing this scene about Willy Wonka, and someone who had never seen the movie or heard of the story accidentally called him Wally Wonka. And instead of being like correcting him or letting that throw us off because he said it incorrectly, they used the improv principle of yes and to be like, "Oh yes, Wally Wonka, the evil twin brother of Willy Wonka." And then the rest of the scene became about this rivalry between Willy Wonka, the good chocolatier, and Wally Wonka, the evil one. And it was really funny. There was another scene where someone was acting out, eating a Pop-Tart, doing space object work, we call this, like eating a Pop-Tart. And they had forgotten that they were doing that, and they just put their hand down. But instead of just like letting that go, someone called it out, and they're like, "Hey, did you just drop your half-eaten Pop-Tart on the ground right now?" And then the rest of the scene became about how this person just dropped food everywhere and would never finish a whole meal or a whole Pop-Tart. And so that became really funny. To tie all these things together, I'd like to leave you with this piece of advice, which is the next time you make a mistake, own up to it, but don't beat yourself up about it, because it could turn into something great for you, your family, your community, or the rest of the world. Thank you very much.